Thank you for joining us today for the August webinar of the National Center for Rural Road Safety. Today's webinar is being co-hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence. Today's webinar will be Towards Zero Deaths Through Improved Transportation Systems Management and Operation and Rural Emergency Response. While we're waiting for, it looks like a few more people to enter the room, I'm going to go through the polls that we have open so far. It looks like today's representation is mainly from state DOT, about 26% of you. We have about 7% from local transportation departments, 20% from first response agencies, 20% from universities, and about 26% that are private consultants. It looks like most of you are joining us from a location by yourself, but there are several places where there are 2 to 3 people in a room. For those of you who have multiple people in your room, if you wouldn't mind sending us a roster with names and email addresses to info@ruralsafetycenter.org. With that, we will be able to send you out an evaluation, a survey at the end of today's webinar, and that survey is required if you'd like a completion certificate for today's webinar. It looks like most of you, well, about half of you are joining us on the computer only, with the other half of you being both on the computer and the phone. For those of you who are joining us both on computer and phone, please make sure that you mute your computer sound, otherwise you will have feedback. And it looks like a majority of you, about 45%, are joining us today from the Midwest, although we do have about 25% from the Western U.S., 15% from the Southeast, 10% from the Northeast. And we are going to move over and get our presentation itself ready at this point. So again, thank you for coming today to our jointly hosted August webinar from the National Center for Rural Road Safety and the National Operations Center of Excellence. Today we're going to be talking about Towards Zero Deaths Through Improved Transportation Safety Management and Operations and Rural Emergency Response. A few webinar logistics for you. This webinar will last about an hour and a half. The webinar is being recorded and will be archived on the Safety Center's website. For quality of this recording, we have all of the phones muted other than the presenters. If you do have any questions, you can feel free to use the chat pod on the left-hand side of the screen. You can put those questions in there at any time, and when we do stop for question and answer sections, we will go back to those and read them out loud for the presenters. As I just mentioned, if you are listening on the phone, please make sure that you mute your computer so that you won't have any feedback. If you'd like to maximize the presentation, on the top right-hand side of your screen, you will see 4 arrows that point outwards. If you click on that, it will maximize the presentation for you. At the end of each section from each presenter, there will be time for question and answers. And again, you can put any questions you have in that chat pod on the left-hand side. There is also a handout pod at the bottom center of the screen, and in there you can download a PDF version of today's presentation. This will also be available on our website when we do archive the streaming version of the presentation as well. And we will lastly be having some follow-up surveys. We will have a survey that comes out directly after today's webinar that will ask you some information about the content and the presenters. If you fill out this survey, you will be eligible for a completion certificate and also to be able to apply for CEUs for free. We will also be sending out a survey in about 3 months that will ask you just 4 questions, and that one will be to try and gauge whether or not you've been able to put into practice any of the concepts that you learned today, whether you've shared them at your company, if you have done something different based on this webinar. Those are the types of things we'll be looking for in a few months. We have 3 presenters today, and we would like to thank all of them for taking the time to come and present for us. I'm going to read you their bios right now. We have Sergeant Dan Dytchkowski. He has been with the Erie County Sheriff's Office, Division of Police Services since 2003 and currently serves in the Training Accreditation Office. For 20 years, prior to working in law enforcement, he worked in various emergency health service management positions. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Emergency Health Services Administration and a Master of Public Administration. Since 2009, Sergeant Dytchkowski has served as a law enforcement stakeholder representative on behalf of the National Sheriff's Association with TSAG, which is the Transportation Safety Advancement Group. We also have Mark Bott, who has been with the Michigan Department of Transportation for over 27 years, serving as the engineer of traffic and safety, managing the activities of the traffic and safety area. These activities include safety programs, department sign, and pavement marking programs, geometric design, and the development of standards, typicals, and guidelines pertinent to these areas. Key emphasis areas are the integration of senior mobility, pedestrian and bicyclist, and safety initiatives into everyday activities to reduce fatalities and serious injuries as part of MDOT's Towards Zero Deaths activities. Mark serves as the system manager of the Traffic and Safety $52 million capital outlay construction program consisting of safety programs, signing, and pavement marking improvement categories. In addition, he oversees the update and approval of the Michigan MUTCD and is the manager of the logo signing and tourist-oriented directional signs program. Mark graduated from Michigan Technology University with a bachelor's and master's degree in transportation and geotechnical engineering. And our third and final presenter will be Stephen Brink. Steve has been with the Michigan DOT for the past 4 years as the Southwest Region's Traffic Safety and Operations Engineer. He coordinates and administers the region's business processes for traffic safety and intelligent transportation systems. In addition, he is a traffic incident management instructor and facilitates the region's mobility performance metrics. Steve is a licensed professional engineer in Michigan and Illinois and received his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Michigan Technological University. So for today's webinar, the goals are that once you've completed this webinar, you'll have learned how engineering, law enforcement, and emergency management agencies can work together to improve transportation systems management and operations and rural emergency response to work towards the goal of Towards Zero Deaths. And in order to talk to you guys about this, our first presenter will be Dan Dytchkowski, who will go through the law enforcement and emergency management agency side of this work. And then we will have Mark and Steve, who will follow up with a case study for which Michigan DOT did to show you more of the engineering and planning side. Before we move on to our presenters, we do have one poll question that we would like to ask all of you. And this is, have you ever coordinated with law enforcement and or emergency management agencies in your area? Yes, no, I work for a law enforcement or emergency management agency. I don't know, or not applicable. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to fill out this poll. Okay, and it does look like everyone has had a chance to fill out the poll. And it looks like about 74% of you have indeed worked with law enforcement and emergency management agencies in your area. So we're hoping that today for you guys, you learn a few more techniques to do this. And for those of you who have not yet, about 15% of you, we're hoping that you will get some great ideas today for how to incorporate law enforcement and emergency management agencies into your traffic systems management and operations. So our learning objectives for today's webinar are for you to be able to recognize how engineering, law enforcement, and emergency management agencies can work together, how to understand how various data can be used to undertake a road safety audit across a corridor, and to use an assortment of operations techniques and infrastructure changes to reduce crash risk. And to get you started, I'm going to pass it on to Sergeant Dan Dytchkowski. Dan?
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, yes, Dan. We can hear you.
Okay, excellent. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. Thank you very much for asking me to participate in this discussion. I think that it's the fact that we have transportation engineers that want to sit down and listen to an emergency services type perspective. When I say emergency services, I mean police, law enforcement, fire, emergency medical services, emergency management, and there are differences in those disciplines. And I hope that I saw quite a few of you stated in the poll that approximately 75% said you do work with or you coordinate with law enforcement and emergency management agencies. I'm just hoping that when you did that, you also meant fire and EMS, because emergency management agencies are like your disaster preparedness and planning. One of the things that I think is really important is when we're talking about improvement using transportation safety management organizations and emergency response, it's really a, what I would call, it's got to be there has to be more dialogue between the responders and the engineers and the folks that manage the roads. And what I'd like to do is, if you don't know about the Transportation Safety Advancement Group, it's a multidiscipline of folks that are, what we do is I don't want to say we provide expert recommendations to DOT, but we're sort of like I guess the easiest way is like a think tank, and they give us issues that are challenging DOT, and it relates more to the use of intelligent transportation systems. We have folks from Fire Rescue, which is the International Association of Fire Chiefs. The law enforcement would be the National Sheriff's Association and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Emergency Medical Services, it's the National Association of State EMS Officials. We have the, from emergency management perspective, we have the National Association of Emergency Managers, but we also have folks from non-emergency response stakeholder organizations on the panel of people. We include academia. We have someone from Penn State, and we have someone from Stanford, and their expertise and transportation academic research. In addition, we include an AASHTO representative. So it's a group of people sitting in a room that represent all the different disciplines that have an interest in making it safer for emergency responders to respond to incidents, crashes on the highways. It also looks at data sharing and including even transportation officials in, it goes both ways, transportation officials having input in emergency response planning. I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with TSAG. There's a lot of work that we do in Washington. The vice chair of the organization, and I would encourage you to go to their website, and it's listed there at the bottom of the slide, and at your own leisure. So why, what's the connection between emergency services and USDOT? And I'm wondering if some of you understand that emergency medical services as we know them today actually came out of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Maybe most of you know that. So if you know that, I apologize. I just want to show you that there is a long-standing connection between the USDOT and emergency medical services. And where that impetus started was from a document back in 1965, Accidental Death and Disability, the Neglected Disease of Modern Society. I'm sorry, it was in 66. And it was produced by the National Academy of Sciences. And they were talking about the amount of deaths that occurred from traumatic injury, and the largest of which were caused by traffic crashes, or at the time, motor vehicle accidents. 49,000 deaths occurred in 1965. So every year, pretty much, people were dying on the highways. The same amount of people were dying on the highways that we lost in the entire Vietnam War. If you were to look at this document, half of the folks that died from traumatic injuries died on the highways. Hence the reason why the USDOT was given the responsibility by the federal government in the Highway Safety Act of '66, which created the National Traffic Safety Agency within Commerce at the time. It created emergency care training, where the curriculum for emergency medical technicians was developed by the United States Department of Transportation. And at the same time, it started on vehicle safety standards and research. That's the connection between emergency medical services, law enforcement, and fire with the United States Department of Transportation, and that it still resides within the United States Department of Transportation. The new Office of Next Generation 911, which I will talk about shortly, is within the USDOT. And the Next Generation 911 Office coordinates all of the new technology that will be utilized in the ability of folks to communicate with 911 centers. So what are our challenges in emergency response? Okay, and this is just to you folks in transportation engineers. Here are the things that we struggle with. Rural fire and EMS predominantly is handled by volunteers. So getting those folks involved is a challenge. They work during the day predominantly, and their training and meetings are on evenings and weekends. Rural law enforcement, there are full-time, there are part-time, and there are volunteers. The other challenge we have is time distance. Responding to the incident, getting on scene, stabilizing the incident, doing a size-up and stabilizing the incident, assessing patients, making sure at the same time that all the responders are arriving safely, are safe while on location, and safely package patients and begin transport, and that's after any extrication times. Crashes out on the, and you guys know this, the crashes that occur out in the rural and wilderness areas of our country are typically, we have a higher fatality rate out there. It's because people are traveling at faster speeds. And so we have more of a challenge out there with people are typically sicker, meaning when I mean sicker, they have more traumatic injuries. The other challenges we have are communication capabilities. If you're in an urban or suburban area, communications, radio communications, telephone communications, cellular communications are relatively intact and easily accessible. Out in the rural areas, depending on the area, depending on the terrain, you may or may not have communication. The other issue is, are DOT, local DOT, government agencies like county or state DOT officials, do you have the ability to communicate with local responders? So that's a challenge. Are we when you're out there and you need assistance, particularly where I'm from in Buffalo, we need DOT assistance. For instance, at crash scenes in the wintertime because it's terribly icy. And right now, we do not have a direct radio contact with DOT. Next generation 911 and responder distraction. And what I mean by next generation 911 is the 911 system in the United States has not kept up with the technology that is available in cellular technology. And you can take pictures, you can take video, we can send those things to our friends, we can search the internet. Well, the problem is that 911 centers right now, the vast majority of them, are not able to receive text messages. They're not able to receive those pictures or video. And that would be very helpful if emergency responders were able to see that information ahead of time so that they know what equipment to send, that if they need more assistance. So that's what's coming up when I say next generation 911. And we are at the beginning of that. And it's going to take a while for 911 centers across the United States to start putting that technology into their centers to prepare itself to accept that information. Now, what I mean by responder distraction, well, it's all fine and good to have all this information, but now most of you are pretty much aware, and you may, even though you work in DOT, you probably have computers in your vehicles. Many police agencies in the United States have computers in their car, and also in fire trucks and in ambulances now. The tougher part is with law enforcement, we're the only people in the vehicle. Okay, typically we don't respond with two people in the vehicle. And so that's a challenge when you're trying to drive and also look at information on a computer screen. And human behavior would cause you to look at that screen at the same time as you're trying to go somewhere. Fire and EMS typically have someone else in the vehicle so that passenger can look at the information and the driver can focus on the road. There is a higher incidence of law enforcement or police crashes because they're distracted by looking at the computer screen in the car. And that's only if they admit it. I was talking to the sheriff in the next county over, and he said to me, it's amazing, Dan, he said, since we've put these mobile data terminals, the computers in the cars, we've had a higher incidence of the deer ran out in front of the patrol car, and that's why I crashed. So there are challenges associated with that, and developing other aids as heads-up displays come about in the future. Then it might not be able, maybe we can draw the attention on the road, and they can look at their windshield and still see the data that they need to see, like the address or a GPS. This next generation 911 technology also will allow the officer or fire or EMS to be able to talk to the caller as they're driving to the scene. And that is much more important in the rural areas than it is in the urban and suburban areas, because the response times are shorter. In law enforcement, when we're responding in the rural and wilderness areas, we are responding alone. And so the more information we have, I think it'll be safer. At least it is safer, because we have a better idea, we have more intelligence on what is going on at the location. So we do have a problem with responder distraction. TSAG has done a white paper on that issue with recommendations. And so that is probably one of the biggest challenges that I would like transportation officials to support when they have any input with emergency responders and getting that type of equipment in their vehicles, so it makes it safer. I think participation by transportation officials will be very helpful. And here's the other thing, lack of participation regarding highway development planning. I mean, almost 75% of you said you actually coordinate or work with emergency responders. Again, how much of that is done in the rural areas, because those folks are volunteers, and getting them to the table during the day when most of the transportation officials are at work Monday through Friday, typically 8 to 4. So here are my suggestions, and if you guys are already doing this, God bless you. State Highway Safety Strategic Plan. Our emergency response stakeholders, their organizations, involved in the development. Do you include the State Sheriff's Association, the State Chiefs of Police, the State Volunteer Firefighters Association, the State EMS stakeholder associations? At that state level, are you also including in your ITS plans, do you include emergency response organizations? Because we are going to be using vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure just as much as transportation officials. At least that's the planning that I see in Washington. So when you're doing your ITS plans for your state plan, please try to include the stakeholder organizations for emergency response. And the same goes for regional transportation organizations, your traffic safety management organizations. There is an organization here in Buffalo, NITEC is the group, and NITEC is really, it's a coalition of folks that looks at, it's basically a forum for emergency responders and transportation officials to get together, and it is getting back, NITEC is the Niagara International Transportation Technology Coalition. The thing that is extremely unique about NITEC is that it includes, because we're right on the international border, it actually includes the province of Ontario and the City of Niagara Falls, Ontario, and regional governments in Canada. So we're all sitting at the same table, talking about planning, responding across international border if necessary, and using this as a way of prodding people in our state capital and in Washington, and the same goes for Toronto and Ottawa, so that the governments allow us to go across international borders to respond with memorandums of understanding and the national governments leading the way. NITEC also has, because it's a coalition of folks using ITS, it provides real-time information, as most urban and suburban areas of the country provide. It also has a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week transportation management center, or some folks call it a transportation operations center. And emergency responders, when they request any transportation department assistance, we advise our dispatch centers to call NITEC at the Transportation Management Center, and they contact the DOTs that assets that we need. So it's a one-stop shop. It's a forum for us to get together to plan, but we also are provided assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get a hold of DOT assets when we need them. So I'd strongly encourage you to look at their website. I've listed it there on the slide to get an idea of what we do. I don't know, each state is different. In New York State, each county has a local traffic safety board. And if you have, and some states have councils of government, COGS, it depends on what state you're located. I encourage you, if you're on traffic safety boards, make sure that emergency responder groups are involved. Again, the hard part is getting volunteer response agencies to participate because they work during the day. So I just want to make you mindful of that. Are you guys included, transportation officials included in debriefings where there have been major crashes or fatalities, or major weather-related events? Like, I know this is going to shock you, but in Buffalo we get snow in the winter, and not only do we get snow, we get lots of snow, except for this past winter. It's been wonderful. We barely got any snow, but the winter before that, we had significant snowfall to the point where it overwhelmed the folks here in Western New York. It was all lake effect snow. For instance, where I live, south of Buffalo, we received 7 feet of snow in 2 days. So that's a lot of snow. So we were overwhelmed, but we got together using NITEC as the venue and forum, and we continue to upgrade our plans and work out bugs. But if DOT officials, you guys, the engineers, are not participating in that type of debriefings, I would strongly encourage you to try to do so any way you can, because your expertise is very important to us in law enforcement as much as the expertise we have is important to you when you're doing your planning. There's also data-driven approaches, it's DDAX, and is data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. And it was developed by NHTSA and the USDOT, DOJ, the Department of Justice. And basically what it is geomapping and hotspots. If you're already doing this, great. If not, I'd strongly encourage you to contact your local law enforcement officials to see if they are using it. Because here's an example of where they combined crime data along with crash data. And the blue areas are just, they're crime hotspots. And it's automatically produced, but as you can see the crash density along certain areas. I strongly encourage you, if you aren't already gathering this data and seeing these hotspots when you're doing your planning, please get a hold of that information, because as you can see, it's very valuable when you can get a visual on where all the crashes are occurring and where you need to do your planning, and to see if the issue isn't just a law enforcement issue of people, we need to do more enforcement to get people to slow down or stop doing whatever they're doing that is illegal, but is it an engineering issue? So again, try your best to get a hold of that data and look at the picture. One of the things that I wanted to do, if you already have not heard of Towards Zero Deaths, it is a national strategy on highway safety. Back in 2009, multiple traffic safety stakeholders started talking at a conference, and they wanted to create a national strategic highway safety plan, and that everyone would have the same vision across the nation, not just in the state that you live in or the county, but a national strategy or vision. And what they came about with is the elimination of highway deaths as a goal, and that even one death is unacceptable. And the name of the effort became called, Towards Zero Deaths, a national strategy on highway safety. And could you now go to that website? I just want to walk you through the website real quick. For those of you who are not familiar with this national strategy.
So it'll just take a second for Dana to start sharing that website for everyone who's following along.
There you go. Awesome. Okay, so you can see where there's strategy, there are marketing tools, and your resources that you need, and all of the partners. Do me a favor, click on the partners and show them the steering committee. So you have, just on the steering committee, is the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. You have AASHTO, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, the Governor's Highway Safety Association, International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Association of County Engineers, the National Association of State EMS Officials, and the National Local Technical Assistance Program Association. So the support was provided by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and NHTSA. So going back to, could you go back to the home? There you go. Click on, as you can see right in the highway, it says read the TCD National Strategy. I would encourage you guys, the way to really understand this strategy is actually download the document, give it a good read, and it will help you understand where they're going, and it will actually help you, if you can go back to the main screen again, please. Become a participant, all right? You'll be able to, if you're not already part of it, you don't have to be a state organization. It could be a private company, a trucking company, it could be a local county traffic safety committee, it could be any organization at all that has interest in reducing highway fatalities to zero. I see we're at 13:41. I'm concerned about time. How are we doing on time?
I think we can just show them where the videos are, and they can watch them at their leisure afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I encourage you to look at the videos. They're more, to me, they're more of a video that if you're trying to sell the idea to the bosses to participate, you know, look at the videos. They're great videos, and I strongly encourage folks to really participate in this national strategy. So I'm going to turn it back over to the moderators.
Thank you, and while we're waiting for Dana to turn back over, I will again let you guys know that we will take any questions that you have over in the chat pod on the left-hand side. We did have a question earlier about whether or not this webinar is being recorded, and it is, and it will be available within the next couple days on our website under our Archived Safety Center trainings, where you can find all of our previous webinars. And again, the PDF version of today's PowerPoint is already available for download in the center of the screen. And while we are waiting to see if anyone has any questions, we will ask you one more poll question. So which of the following are ways that engineering, law enforcement, and emergency management agencies can work together? Is it including law enforcement and emergency management agencies in the planning process, open communication, multidisciplinary debriefings after major events or after the winter season? All of the above, none of the above, or I don't know, I don't remember. And Dan, while we're waiting for people to fill in the poll, a question for you is if I have not yet started working with emergency responders, how would you suggest that I do get started with that? What's the first thing you'd suggest I do?
It really depends on what level you're working from. If you're working at the state level, then I would strongly encourage you to look for statewide stakeholder organizations for law enforcement, for EMS, for fire, and even, believe it or not, tow associations. One of the folks that I think we forget about sometime are the tow truck operators, because they also are killed out on the highways while going out to remove debris and remove wrecks. Their job is just as important as anyone else, and as a team approach to clearing the highway and making it safer. We need to get that stuff out of there. So that would be your first step if you're a statewide. If you're countywide or regional, I would suggest that you would contact local county officials and ask them. Again, it depends on what state you're from. Most emergency response or government services are provided at the county level. If you're in the Northeast, it is provided by the county, the town, or village, or city. So it really depends on what level you're working from. If you want to contact me so that I know where you're coming from, where you're located, and what level of government you're working from, moderators, you're welcome to share my email address with them, the person asking the question.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dan. And it does look like everyone has completed our poll. So, Dan, you should be able to see the results right now if you would like to address the answers.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. You need all of that. You need to include everyone in the planning process. You need open communication. And I'll be the first to tell you that cops are tough to deal with and they're tough to communicate with, but we're getting better. Multidisciplinary debriefings, you need to participate together. And so all of you have checked, the vast majority of you checked all of the above, and that's absolutely, you need to do all of that. And it takes work, and it takes communicating and participation. So unfortunately, but it's one more thing you've got to do in your job. But it's absolutely critical to do so that all of us are communicating and hopefully we can work together through planning processes to not only reduce deaths from crashes, but make it safer for all of us, the responders.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dan, for taking the time out today to present for us. We really do appreciate it. We did have one other comment come in on the chat pod, a comment versus a question, and this one is to give everyone who is participating in today's webinar another example of a way that it can be done. In Nevada, the Traffic Incident Management Program was started by the Nevada Department of Transportation, and a consultant is on board to help administer that program. So if you would like more information about that, you can please let us know, and we can put you in contact with the person who has let us know about that comment as well. And now we will have Mark Bott speak for Michigan DOT, and he's going to talk about understanding how various data can be used to undertake a road safety audit across the corridor. Mark?
Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody for joining me today. What we want to talk about is really a road safety audit on a large scale, of course, but once again, it is a road safety audit, and it's really the evaluation of I94, a major corridor that goes east and west throughout the state of Michigan. And really what I want to do is set up why we did this in the first place. Here's the scene that occurred on January 9th, 2015. We had 193 vehicles involved in a crash during whiteout conditions. If anybody's from Michigan, or our previous speaker talked about from Buffalo, there are occasions when you travel down our roadway system that you do encounter some whiteout conditions. That is what you do when you live in the Midwest or northern part or even upper western part of the United States. In this particular crash, as the slide indicates, we had 60 vehicles involved in the eastbound direction, 133 in the westbound. But what's really interesting, there's 76 trucks involved in the crash. What we have in this particular spot on I-94 is average annual daily traffic of close to 49,000 vehicles, of which 23% is commercial traffic. So once again, any type of incident, you are going to involve trucks. More unique things about this crash, it occurred on the eastern side of Kalamazoo County, mile marker 90, so you're 2 miles away from the nearest interstate. Talk about working conditions that our incident management people have to work in, our first responders, 15 degrees with a wind chill of 4. And by the way, you come up this large crash, you have an active fire. And what was really unique is a couple weeks before this, the local incident responders had a tabletop exercise on a major crash involving a fire and involving a tanker. Well, what do you know? We had a tanker carrying acid that was leaking, was on fire, and in fact, the area had to be evacuated for approximately a day due to that. And by the way, add to all the top of this, near the end of the crash was a semi carrying fireworks that was on fire. So you have we have actual video, I don't have for this presentation though, showing fireworks going off during the operation itself. So, but if you're going to have a crash near a local National Guard base, because right at that accident scene was a closed gate onto the interstate system. So we were able to get our emergency service people out there and help with the situation. With that, though, we were very lucky. Unfortunately, there was one fatality, 22 injuries. However, if something as major as this, we were very lucky. Doesn't mean that you don't have injuries to your emergency service people. As it shows on the screen, 6 people were actually injured while trying to help others and try to help open up this crash site, which was closed for several days. Always is going to be the concern is during these type of conditions is speed. Really, the speed during collision, we state police was ever to recreate the crash scene, and actually the speeds were 30 to 40 miles per hour. So really, people were slowing down. However, there were 58 cited for traveling too fast conditions, of which 30 were trucks. So once again, even though you're slowing down, you need to be responsible for your speed. This is an interesting slide we put together because, of course, the first thing being asked is, well, where are these people from that were involved in the crash? Well, here's the map with data on the drivers involved in the crash. We've applied the zip codes where they're from, and we show the cars in triangles and trucks in squares. And what's noted is if there was a hazard action noted in the crash report, which we call the UD10 here in Michigan, that's shown in red, and those without are shown in green. So it really showed that quite a few of our travelers on this roadway actually lived along that corridor. So they're very familiar Michigan drivers. They know the type of weather conditions that we would experience out there, but yet we have this crash. Now, I do want to note we did not include the people from Maine. We had one person from Juneau, Alaska, and a driver from Phoenix. In response to this, Senator O'Brien, who represents that area, and our governor, Mr. Snyder, asked us to study that section of where the crash occurred. However, in response to that, Michigan Department of Transportation thought it was better, why don't we study the entire southwest corridor of I94, starting from the Indiana state line, going all the way east to our interchange with US 127 in Jackson for a total of 143 miles. But to make this happen, we had to have a collaborative effort. The Michigan Department of Transportation was in charge of it. However, we did seek help from our state police, which would include the headquarters, all the posts, particularly those commanders whose troops are out there every day. They know where the trouble spots are. And also our Office of Highway Safety Planning and our Federal Highway Administration. And then within MDOT itself, we relied on both central office staff, our regional staff, those traffic and safety engineers out there, our maintenance personnel, more importantly, because once again, just like those troopers, they're answering those calls all the day. They know where the problem spots are. Why not get their input into this evaluation? So really, our purpose was to assess the safety, operations, maintenance, and enforcement efforts along this corridor and identify what are some countermeasures, both current ones and programmed ones, and perhaps what are things we should be considering in the future. Our timeline was between March and July of 2015, and really the procedure we followed is data collection, analysis, and actual meetings in every one of these counties to take a look at the sites. So with that, I'd like to go over a high-level corridor analysis. And this first thing we did is, how does this corridor operate in the first place? During the time period 2012 to 2014, this corridor experienced 6,678 crashes, of which 87%, basically 5,800, did not involve any type of animal. We have quite a bit of deer-type crashes in the state of Michigan. So when you take that in consideration, the total crash rate, even with animals, is 101. It's pretty comparable, or actually right in the middle between similar corridors in the state. So it's not really an outlier per se, but when you look at the winter crash rate, which is 43.81, it does stand out there. We only have 2 other corridors in the state of Michigan. They're very similar. They have a winter crash rate between December and February slightly above that. So once again, we wanted to compare the other freeways posted at 70 miles per hour. But one thing we did notice that when we did compare them, that this corridor generally experience 24% greater in winter crashes than those other remaining corridors. Now when we started breaking it down county by county, really wanted to see what were the outliers, what is the county or counties of concern, and it's pretty obvious. And next few slides you'll see more maps, so I can go back to what we're talking about here. But that generally, Van Buren County is the one that really stood out for basically everything but a fatal crash rate, which was quite interesting. Consider this is nowhere near the location of concern that actually spurred this whole study in the first place. But once again, it starts you honing down as where are the areas you need to look at to start your study when you're looking at a corridor of this magnitude. Like I said, it's 143 miles long. As part of this effort, we had a university on board with Dr. Tim Gates at that time with Wayne State University and now with Michigan State University. He led the effort crunching the data for us so we could start understanding more of what is going on. And this is just an example looking at the corridor crash rate both for eastbound and westbound. As you travel down the roadway, once again, where are those outliers? And you can see a lot of them are right near our urban areas. But one thing that was very interesting to find out is that 16% more crashes occur in the eastbound than the westbound. And really, the only thing we could really attribute to that is when you start really comparing the two directions, the eastbound has the most unique geometrics in regard to interchanges. So once again, that is what we attribute why those crashes are more representative, particularly in Berrien, Van Buren, and Jackson counties, as shown by the in the blue. Now here, this is just an example. I think we've all worked at with heat maps. This is an example of one we did for interchanges. Once again, trying to figure out what are the troublesome interchanges that are experiencing crashes. This was also done for segments itself. But once again, it's just an example of what was used by the team to help us more focus in, narrow it down to what particular locations of concern we should have along this corridor and further our analysis. This slide here shows the average snowfall along the corridor. What is interesting, and it's not really surprising when you look at the location of, particularly Berrien and Van Buren counties. They're on the far left in relationship to that large body of water called Lake Michigan. A lot of lake effect snow, but once again, that's where the heavy snowfall occurs, but the actual crash site was on the far east side of Kalamazoo County, where the snowfall starts diminishing quite rapidly. So, but some of the interesting facts from that, once again, point out Van Buren County, is Van Buren County experienced 57% more crashes than the corridor average, 30% more eastbound than westbound. And really interesting, as you get further east, yes, we do have snow in Michigan, maybe not quite like they do in Buffalo, but considerably a lot more winter crashes than our Kalamazoo and Jackson area, significantly more. One interesting fact, though, in looking at the crashes in relationship to winter-type conditions, approximately 65% of the winter season crashes involve the vehicle driving too fast conditions. However, when you look at the entire season for that time period, that fact, that hazard was noted on the crash report 38% of the time. So it's quite obvious to us, and this is something that law enforcement speaks loudly of, is that driving too fast conditions plays a huge role in winter season crashes. From there, like I said, many graphs were done, a lot of analysis was done, and really what our approach was is we had separate meetings in each county, bring in the local MDOT, bring in the local state police representatives there. We also within MDOT have a traffic incident management coordinator, and she brought in the concerns and information from the local first responders So we could get together, review the data. We would then go out based on what we thought probably some trouble and concerns, and actually drove that entire corridor in that county, and really trying to get a feeling for correlating the crashes with the geometric cross-section, what are the operations out there, what are the pavement conditions, particularly any low-lying areas, of course, with river crossings. Do we have change of pavement type? What about our roadside? We have some areas that were shaded that our maintenance people with local law enforcement indicated, yes, that's a troublesome area, Mark, because of the shade. We always seem to have ice form in these areas. Looking at the barriers and looking at the actual geometrics of the interchanges themselves. And from there, we also looked at our UD10s. That's what we call our crash reports here in the state of Michigan. We reviewed those, took those locations and looked at the crash reports. Once again, can we identify specific crash types of vehicles, some factors that are occurring here. And on the slide here, you do see both where our field review locations were and where were locations. We actually took a harder look at the crash reports and the field, trying to tie everything together. From here, it's like, well, what we're trying to do is where are our safety problems, but more importantly is what has been done and what is currently being programmed. From a MDOT point of view, road construction wise, what are some safety initiatives that our local post or the overall state police have? What are some safety initiatives our Office of Highway Safety Planning are having statewide that may impact this corridor, or just even on the corridor itself? You know, quite often you're doing crash analysis, you find the problem, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I've already got a project going on there, and it's going to address the issue. So once again, it's documenting what's planned, what is programmed, and then from there, what are other recommendations going to be proposed? And we broke those 3 recommendations down into 3 bins or categories, you want to call it. And generally, those are tied to money themselves. So we're talking short term, which are usually a low dollar amount, medium term, which is your middle of the road, and then anything that's long term, it's going to be high cost. So once again, take a look at those items and what could we possibly place along this roadway to address what we're finding. And here are some potential treatments that we looked at, the categories of winter weather, geometrics, pavement surface, visibility, and congestion management. Really, if it goes back to winter weather, of course we're going to look at that. That's what was the situation that occurred during this incident. You know, what can we possibly do with environmental sensors to help not only our staff to monitor or maintain that roadway during severe winter conditions, but also inform the motorists too. How can we get information to them on our DMS boards? Looking at the geometric type improvements, is there anything we can do to some of those interchanges to help lengthen those ramps, or realign them, perhaps where we're having some issues. Also too, quite a bit of cable barrier around that corridor. Is there some possible locations we can maybe relocate that barrier to help alleviate some of the crashes that are occurring? Pavement surface, of course, is always a concern. Is there any areas that would be good candidates for high friction surface type improvements? Visibility is always going to be an issue. We're always going to be looking at ways to improve our delineation along our roadways. And of course, I take pride as the traffic sign engineer for the department. What can we do to ensure we have the best signs for our customers out there? Last but definitely not least is congestion management. What can we do in, when there is, when you have that much traffic, you're going to have an incident no matter what. Our goal, yes, is towards zero deaths. Are we going to eliminate crashes altogether? Perhaps not in our near future, but when a crash does occur, what can we help? What can we do as a DOT to help our partners out there? Can we give them some crash investigation sites, help them pull over, get that law enforcement person or whoever responding to the incident off the roadway as much as possible so we don't have another occurrence out there that is not good. To, of course, what our legislators would ultimately like for this whole entire corridor, ultimately adding a 3rd lane along the entire stretch of I94. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Steve Brink, our local traffic safety engineer of our Southwest region, who he will be able to talk more on what currently is being done on I-94 and the recommended countermeasures.
Thank you very much, Mark. Before we go over to Steve, we do have another poll question for everyone, and we do have some time for questions for Mark. So if anyone does have questions, you can feel free to type those in on the chat pod on the left-hand side. We will go to a poll question real quick. Which of the following types of data did Michigan DOT not use in their corridor road safety audit? Was it crash rate, vehicle type, weather, geometry, operations, pavement, roadside, barriers, interchanges, or animal vehicle crashes? So go ahead and take a look. Again, it's which one did they not use? And while people are answering that question, we did also have another piece of information put into the chat pod. Again, not a question, but just for the general audience. Another example of a way that it's been done. In Illinois, the TIMS program has partnered with TOW, Fire Marshals, Illinois Tollway, ILEAS, State Police, EMS, and Illinois DOT. All of them work and train together to make the TIMS program a great success. And the multidisciplinary class works well and gets buy-in from others. So again, if anyone has any questions on how Illinois is doing it as well, we can put you in touch with Teresa on that to get more information. And Mark, while we are also waiting for everyone to fill out the poll question, one question that we did have for you is in Michigan's audit of I94, what factor did speed play when comparing the winter crashes to all-season crashes?
I think I covered that. Basically, speed is a greater cause in winter-related crashes here in the state of Michigan. And it may not, when I say speed, it may not necessarily going over the posted speed limit. It's just, you know, as we try to teach our in our driving strategy here is to drive for the conditions, and that can be tough. But I think on that one slide we had about 65% of our winter-related crashes on that corridor were due to speed, as opposed to when you look at all conditions, and that was only 24%.
Perfect, thank you. And I have ended the poll and posted the results of those if you'd like to address those real quick, please.
I see we have some very good listeners out there. Yes, we did not really look at animal crashes. Like I said, we do probably one of the states in the country that have probably the highest animal crashes. So we almost feel like we should just put a deer warning crossing sign at the state border and just say the next 500 miles. But yeah, definitely it was not the focus for this corridor study.
Perfect, thank you. And thank you once again, Mark, for presenting. We will pass it on, as you mentioned earlier, to Steve now. I'll pull up your slides for you. And there you go, you're all set, Stephen.
All right, thanks. I'm going to go through an assortment of operations techniques and some infrastructure changes that we're trying to implement to reduce crash risk. All right, Mark has shown us what kind of data was used to gather for the study and what the findings were. Once we analyzed the corridor and determined what some of the issues are and some solutions, we wanted to show that we are constantly trying to make things safer and more efficient on the roadway. Compile a list of activities we do and projects we've been planning that will help reduce crash risk. First, I'm going to go over some of the operations activities we do. For 5 years now, my region has been utilizing some outcome-based performance metrics to monitor freeway operations along I94. We do that to help make informed decisions and just to operate the roadway better. The chart you see there is our user delay cost data, which compares speed delay information in terms of dollars, compares that to a 4-year average. So basically when we've had issues during a week, and you can see there on the chart a couple of weeks there in red where we had some serious snowstorms, or maybe they're due to incidents. We've discussed what caused those delays and what we can do to prevent or reduce their impact. Another operations measure we do is utilizing maintenance decision support system software. It's something we've had in place for a couple of years now, and it's becoming more commonplace. And it's software that provides pavement forecasting, not just a weather forecast. It tells us what the pavement is expected to do and provides recommended treatment based on what our available options are, whether it's sand, salt, treated salt, what application rate to do, or nothing at all. Something else we're trying to do is to improve information to motorists. We routinely discuss messages for motorists and what is the most effective way to communicate conditions they'll encounter in the hopes that the better information will result in better driver behavior. We've added our snowplow trucks to our state traveler information website so people can see if we are out plowing and or salting. Some of these trucks also have camera images so people can also see how the road condition is, and perhaps they'll reconsider traveling out if it's bad. And we're continually looking for improved efficiencies with maintenance, whether it's utilizing different chemicals, pre-treating the chemicals, or utilizing improved equipment like the zero velocity spreaders, which help deliver material where we want it at higher speeds, or using new equipment like the tow plow pictured here to clear more roadway with less manpower. Now I'm going to go over some of the projects we have planned or under construction. This is our map again, and the colors along the roadway of 94 represents where some of the hot spots were in terms of crashes. And some of the projects we have planned there, we've got several resurfacing projects planned for better pavement friction, improved rideability. The first project on the left of the screen near Lake Michigan there, we have a curve which has the lowest design speed for a horizontal curve along the corridor, and over the next year or two we will be improving that curve. We also have a project in Kalamazoo where we are extending our 3-lane section a little further to the east to improve capacity. We've got several interchange projects along the corridor which will improve freeway operations with the merging of traffic. One of the interchanges nearest where the crash was, we're converting to a traditional diamond interchange. It's currently kind of a confusing configuration at the moment, designed from a long time ago. But there's also a lot of heavy trucks that enter there, so we're extending the ramps so that trucks have a better chance to merge. Some of the less traditional construction projects we have are on this screen here. We have a few ITS projects going on. We have 18 additional CCTV sites coming online soon, complementing some of the other ones we have already. We have 7 environmental sensor stations currently in construction as part of a regional project of 14 total stations. And they will help supplement our maintenance decision support system by providing actual pavement temperatures and salinity content of moisture on the roadway. Recognizing that we have some friction issues in certain places, we have a couple high friction surface treatment projects planned in a few years. To aid in incident management, we have 2 crash investigation sites being planned. Near Kalamazoo, it's on a stretch of I94 where we have a median barrier and narrower shoulders, so it's harder for enforcement or incident response. Another solution we have is installing a living snow fence, which is basically spruce trees to help with the blowing of snow. We have a couple of locations along the corridor in Van Buren County where we're planning that. All right, so as Mark mentioned, we had several potential countermeasures. We took those countermeasures and we compared them to where some of these higher crash locations were, and basically I'm going to go over some of the different groups of solutions and where we're applying them. One of the techniques was advanced de-icing, which is basically more than just spreading dry salt on the road. It's, are we pre-wetting the salt using a brine or other sorts of chemical techniques based on what the conditions are? So with some of these crash locations, we've identified 12 areas where we'd like to work more with maintenance on using some advanced techniques for de-icing. We're excited about our environmental sensor stations coming online and the data it can provide. So we've identified, in addition to the 7 we're building, 5 additional areas where extra information could be beneficial. So one of the reasons we're excited about the environmental sensor stations is not only will it allow us to have better information for managing the storm, we plan to utilize the data taken off the sensors to drive messages for our dynamic message signs. So when the conditions are right, we can say to somebody traveling along the corridor in the middle of the state where it's sunny, of what they could experience ahead if they continue down 94. And another potential use of that data is if we decide to go with a variable speed limit system. We've identified places where, along the corridor, where adding some additional condition-based signing would be beneficial. I guess I will note we don't have legislation that currently permits us to do a regulatory variable speed limit, so that's something we'd have to work with our legislature on. All right, living snow fence, I mentioned that just a few minutes ago. We've identified areas based on talking with our maintenance personnel and responders of where we get a lot of blowing and drifting over the roadway. So the intent here is to basically provide a windscreen of sorts to help with some of those whiteout conditions. We've identified some of those. We've got a couple planned in Van Buren already. All right, moving on to potential interchange improvements. Mark mentioned some of the, extending some of the merge areas. We've got 5 interchanges where we currently have those planned or under construction or recently built. But along with that, we've identified several more where we think some geometric improvements along the ramp would be beneficial. Some of these are just ramp extensions, but some of these are also our realignment where we've got fairly tight loop ramps where we may have some truck overturning issues. Modifying a ramp is fairly expensive, so we also were looking for lower cost solutions. Some of the interchanges we have, they appear fine, and the designs look normal, or they look like they'd be acceptable if you're looking at an aerial image. However, this one you see here, the top image there is a site we visited, and we noticed that it gives the illusion of a very short merging taper. In reality, it's not. I think part of it's due to the grades of the roadway. Some of it has to do with the curb, perhaps. But while we were observing vehicles here, we noticed the drivers tended to merge very early on in the ramp instead of utilizing the entire acceleration distance to get up to speed. So one of the potential solutions would be utilizing a flexible delineation system in order to promote the use of the entire acceleration distance. Interchange lighting was identified as a potential countermeasure at several interchanges. These are some of the interchanges where we had a higher occurrence of nighttime crashes. So we know there can be a safety benefit with lighting. However, we also know that we have to be able to account for the recurring power and maintenance costs. We need to figure out how to fund that before we can make an investment on installing lighting. This stretch of 94 is a lot more rural than some of the other freeways in the state, particularly near Detroit and Ann Arbor. So it's not an inherent solution necessarily. It's not an easy call in these locations. All right, I talked about some of the interchange improvements. We also have some segment improvements that I can go over. Delineation is something that's often overlooked. It's something that gets installed typically with other construction projects. It may not always get the maintenance focus it deserves. In the past, I'm sure, like many other states, we've typically utilized the round prismatic reflectors on delineator posts, but we're exploring other alternatives that may be more durable, potentially cheaper, with all the higher quality sign sheeting we've been using of late. So and the goal of the delineation is to reduce lane departure crashes and try to keep the vehicles on the roadway. Another potential segment improvement is improving the friction. I mentioned we had a couple projects already. There's a few other places where we think it would be beneficial. One of the interchanges is right in the middle of the corridor. We have it listed as a segment, but this is a very long ramp. We also have a segment here shown just east of the crash site. I think it's exit 92, so it's 2 miles east of where the crash is, where we've just got a lot of mainline 94 crashes, and the high friction surface treatment appears to be a good countermeasure for that segment. Other segment improvements would be modifying the roadway cross slope, the super elevation and curves. I mentioned the curve in the one project we have planned. Another improvement would be widening the shoulder in certain places. East of Kalamazoo, I mentioned we had narrower shoulders. So we have had a few crashes where a disabled truck pulls off to the side of the road but doesn't have enough room to really get over very far, and we've had subsequent crashes from that. So we've identified areas where a widened shoulder or curve improvement could help with crashes. All right, another category we didn't want to overlook as far as crashes was secondary crashes. So we wanted to make sure we looked at that as well. All right, I mentioned this is a little bit more of a rural area. However, Kalamazoo is more urban. In the state of Michigan, we do have a service patrol. It's the Freeway Courtesy Patrol over in Detroit and Ann Arbor. That is a potential countermeasure in Kalamazoo, where the ADT is significantly higher than some of the other areas along the corridor. Another solution we're looking at is crash investigation sites. We have 2 planned, but depending upon the usage and success of those, we have other places where we think that could be of benefit. Mark mentioned we have cable median barrier. Most of the corridor of 94 along this study area has cable median barrier or barrier wall. And the purpose of that is, of course, to significantly reduce any sorts of crossover head-on crashes, which are typically catastrophic. But along with that cable rail, especially in the wintertime, we get a fair amount of nuisance hits where people slide off, and it's just a property damage crash, and it wasn't really going to be a chance of being a crossover crash anyway. So we noticed in a few locations where we had a shorter merge area and trucks entering that they could have a tendency of making traffic veer over, and we've had a lot of cable hits in those areas. So potentially relocating the cable closer to the median, or relocating it on the opposite side of the curve as opposed to the inside of the curve, we could reduce some of those minor traffic crashes. This is just another shot. This is a street view of the crash area, and you can see on the eastbound side we've got regular steel guardrail on the right of the roadway, and we have got cable barrier on the median side, but it's very close to the eastbound side of traffic as opposed to the westbound side, where it's a little more wide open. So one thing we like to look at is opportunities to move that further into the median. However, the downside of that is usually cost. There's additional earthwork and grading that needs to happen to make sure that a departing vehicle impacts the cable in a similar way to the way it was tested. So we don't have cars going under the cable or any sort of weird hits that we wouldn't expect. All right. Lastly, I want to go over some of the law enforcement initiatives that we've had along the corridor and throughout the state. For a long time, Michigan State Police has been involved in Operation CARE, which is Combined Accident Reduction Efforts. I believe that's a nationwide campaign. There's the I94 Challenge and the Drive to Save Lives. Basically, in line with Michigan State Police's strategic plan, they use the DDAX that was mentioned earlier to proactively educate and enforce impaired, distracted, drowsy, and careless driving behavior to greatly reduce serious crashes. Mark mentioned our Office of Highway Safety Planning. They're a division of Michigan State Police, and they provide some funding for some of the other campaigns, such as Click It or Ticket, and some of the other ones that people are probably familiar with. The newest initiative coming out of this was the Drive Slow on Ice and Snow billboards, which went along I-94. Federal funding to support expansion of the winter driving campaign along I-94 corridor from Berrien County through Detroit. The area of the state was selected for many reasons, including high volume of traffic, population centers along there, as well as from the multi-vehicle pileup. And it runs through the winter months. Billboards went up along I-94 and a few of the connectors to 94. And the locations were changed every month. In addition, a weather-triggered message was featured when people used the weather channel to check conditions. The Office of Highway Safety Planning also added a social media component and online videos. All right, so that is the summary of the Michigan State Police efforts for enforcement along I-94, as well as a summary of some of the operations and construction activities that at MDOT we're doing to support the findings from the study and reduce crash risk along the corridor.
Thank you very much, Steve. We are going to take do one more poll, and we do have one last time for you guys to ask questions before we wrap up. So if you do have questions, please type those into the chat pod, and they can be for Stephen or any of our other presenters that we've had today as well. Our poll question for you all right now is, which of the following is a technique MDOT is considering to reduce crashes on this corridor? Advanced de-icing, installing environmental sensor stations, enhanced signage, median barriers, and a living snow fence, interchange improvements such as lighting, delineation, and realignment, pavement improvements, alignment changes such as widening the shoulder and increasing super elevation, crash investigation sites, freeway courtesy patrols, all of the above. I don't know, I don't remember. So we'll give everyone a couple seconds to fill that out. Stephen, one question we had for you is, out of all the techniques and improvements that Michigan is using or planning to, what do you think will be most effective?
There are some studies out there showing what percentage, what you attribute a lot of crashes to, and somewhere around 90–95% of crashes involve some sort of human error. So anything to try to change driver behavior may have the most benefit. A combination of strategies that provide better pavement condition information, letting drivers know what to expect as they're traveling down the road, along with police presence and enforcement may have the most influence. Our construction projects can reduce the crash risk, but we'll continue to have winter storms regardless of how effectively we're able to minimize their impacts.
Thank you very much for answering that. We do have the poll question finalized, and I did broadcast those results if you'd like to go ahead and address that as well.
All right, yes, everybody 100% on the what techniques we're using. We are trying to incorporate as many techniques as possible just to target the various risks that are out there that may cause crash.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. Today in the webinar, what we hope you've learned is how to recognize how engineering, law enforcement, and emergency management agencies can work together to understand how various data can be used to undertake a road safety audit across a corridor, and how to use an assortment of operations techniques and infrastructure changes to reduce crash risk. Some additional resources that we do want to point out to you. Responder Safety Learning Network has a traffic incident management on rural roads training that can be done. This training, according to the website, is a program that highlights how fundamental TIM principles can be implemented on rural roads, including pre-planning, communications, PPE, scene assessment, communications, advanced warning, blocking and safe parking, traffic control, and termination. And this training can be found at the link that is available on the screen right now. Again, if you are interested in these resources, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website within a few days, as well as these handout. The PowerPoint is available as a handout in the bottom center, and you'll have access to the links from that PDF. So again, traffic incident management on rural roads, and other training that has been done by Responder Safety Learning Network. We also have our co-host for today, the National Operations Center of Excellence, has several different resources available on their website. They have TSMO resources available at this top link. And then off of their homepage, which is the bottom link, they also have sections called Why TSMO. And underneath this, you can find a business case primer, communications toolkit, CEO briefing book, and TSMO guidance. You will notice, for those of you on the phone who are mostly local or rural, that these are national and can be used in urban or rural locations. So just make sure that you're taking that into consideration as you go through these resources. I do want to point out to everyone that we are only a couple weeks away from the National Working Summit on Transportation in Rural America. Again, this summit is going to be a little bit different from a normal conference where you have speakers for the entire thing. Our speakers will only be for the first half a day. The second day is really a working summit where we will have facilitated discussions on various topics addressing rural transportation safety from multiple different aspects, from the policy side, from the engineering side, from the law enforcement EMS side, from commercial, from tourism. So please take a look at the agenda that is available on our website. And again, that conference is coming up September 7th through 9th. We would love to have all of you there to help share your experience and expertise. The outcome of this summit will be white papers that will be handed up through the USDOT to really try and show why rural transportation safety is so important and how it is different than other transportation safety as well. Upcoming webinars, because we will be having our summit in September, we will not have a webinar for September, but our October webinar will be the results of the Safety Center's research that has been ongoing this past year on assessing the operational and cultural environment of the transportation workforce. So look for those invitation announcements to come out about the date for October. Again, you can get all of our archived webinars for all the previous ones since last November on our website. This particular slide shows the email addresses for all three of our presenters. If you do have any further questions for them, you can contact them, or you can contact the Safety Center Help Desk at our 800 number or info@ruralsafetycenter.org, and we can provide this information to you again as well. So I do want to thank one more time all three of our speakers for taking the time out today to speak. It was a great webinar, and I certainly learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did as well. We'd like to thank the National Operations Center of Excellence for co-hosting with us today. And again, you can find information on their website at transportationops.org. So thank you all for attending today's webinar, and thank you again to Dan, Mark, and Stephen.